Hi everybody, I was sent this petition which I've signed, and 147,783 people have signed it today, and it's a petition requesting the reversal of the dangerous coronavirus bill rushed through Parliament last week. This is very disturbing, and as usual they take powers, and we as a nation, as a species on this planet, are in a very precarious position. The criminal cabal that orchestrated 9/11 and has waged the war on terror and the war of drugs, which has done nothing except increase illegal drugs and the crimes associated with them around the world, as prohibition was known to do via the experiment against alcohol that America did in the 1920s and 30s. And the same with the war on terror, that actually it's increased terror in every nation. And now we have the war on coronavirus, and the criminal cabal have got their key players in every position of power, haven't they? They've got India, they've got Brazil, other South American nations, they've got Australia, they've got Britain, they've got America. Far-right fascism has taken hold. They've decided to focus on the latest flu virus now to give themselves more powers. As I've repeatedly stated, I'm not stating that COVID-19 is not a serious threat or a risk. But I am stating that it is being focused on in order to give more power to criminals. People who have abused their power, liars, known liars and criminals, sex offenders, as Boris Johnson is, according to the lawful suspicion. And here we have this coronavirus bill, and I've read through it. It's here, it's shared in the link here anyway, so you can check. But basically, forced detention and isolation can be of anyone, including children, for any amount of time. This is within a nation that even prime ministers of Britain have been involved in sadistic abuse of children, are known to have been involved. You know, when Wiltshire Police do a thorough investigation into Edward Heath and Jimmy Savile, and say they are 120% certain that Sir Edward Heath was a sadistic paedophile, commonly known among his victims as the Claws, sexually abusing, sadistically abusing children from Britain's children's homes. That was the Prime Minister of Britain, and it was all covered up. And to this day, it's been ignored. Wiltshire Police suffered heavy criticism. Now they can seize our children. Authorities can forcibly take biological samples from your body, your property. Your body becomes property of the state. So they can force you to give your DNA. There's no clear access to legal rights from as yet unidentified isolation facilities. So once they've took you, that's it. You've got no legal rights. You've got no rights to legal representation, a lawyer, nothing. Powers last up to 2 years with reviews every 6 months. Lockdown powers could prevent protests against measures. State surveillance safeguards weakened. So, the usual safeguards that we have, they're gone. Protections from forced detainment and treatment under Mental Health Act lowered. So, somebody like me who chooses to hear and accept the evidence as produced by architects, scientists and engineers about what happened on 9/11, I could be judged mad and carted off to a mental health unit. Cremations can be enforced against personal and religious wishes. Changes to the court system, registration of deaths, no inquest into suspicious deaths, no requirement for any medical certification for burials or cremations. It also indemnifies the health service should they fail, for whatever reason, to provide care. The most frightening part, only one medical officer is required to sign off compulsory treatment order, which means in the real world you can be forced to accept medication or held down and injected with whatever is seen fit. That is the biggest and worst threat to your freedoms. Local authorities will now be exempted from compliance with their duties under the Care Act 2014. So they have no local authorities no longer have any duty of care. The BBC won't be telling you that bit. So if someone dies in police custody or any type of custody, they can simply dispose of the body without any paperwork, medical exam or certification or inquest. I am proposing that this bill be reversed until after the current coronavirus crisis to allow for full, proper and open debate. Any similar bill affecting human rights should also be stopped until the current state of emergency has been completed. Well, I fully support this petition. I believe that we are on the precipice of absolute fascism and it is going to be brutal. They're already using these powers of detaining people under the Mental Health Act. But now they're giving themselves the right to kill people. That's what they've done. The police could come for whatever reason, take me away, kill me, and dispose of my body and not be accountable to anybody. And that on the strength of a virus, on the strength of protecting us from a virus. You see, that is the danger of giving up your rights for security, for safety. You'd never give your rights up, because how can you have security or safety if you've got no rights? And we are being governed by absolute monsters. Make no bones about it. This man and her and the whole of the Tory party that are in office right now, they are monsters. We know they're monsters. They've murdered 200,000 people to date with austerity and unnecessary economic policy, as now we have all witnessed very clearly it was unnecessary, because it turns out they've got billions, actually. Billions and trillions. They've got billions and trillions to bail out the banks again. They've got billions and trillions to give the rich in tax cuts. They've got billions and trillions to waste on Brexit. They've got billions and trillions now to give to the NHS in order that the NHS can pay their private healthcare, hospitals and what have you. All of them with Tory fingers in that private healthcare pie. Tory ministers. And meanwhile the whole nation is clapping on a Thursday for the NHS and key workers. The very same people that this Tory party has trampled on. The very same people that have contributed to the suicide of hundreds of doctors and nurses. Hundreds. And I'll leave my previous video under this video. You check the links in that under that video. that I'll leave below. I'm not leaving I'm not leaving all those links again. Check the links under the video link I'm going to leave under this. And you'll see hundreds of doctors and NHS doctors and nurses have been driven to suicide. Nurses reliant on food banks. And now they've given themselves this amount of power while a nation's on a lockdown. Oh, council issues statement on closure of allotments. Apparently, people working on allotments are high risk. They could be spreading the virus. And then they've just opened this. A cattle shed for the hordes. That's what it is. How dare they? How dare they? How many hospitals have they closed over the last 10 years? And now they give us this. A cattle shed for the herd. There's a crematorium being attached to it, apparently. They're telling, sending out, well, one surgery, and I think it's happened across the board. Surgery apologised for sending do not resuscitate form to patients. If they have to go to hospital, here's the form, sign it. And then we've got another story, which I can't find the link to it here, but basically, people over 60 or with disabilities, other health issues, won't be receiving healthcare. They won't be receiving NHS healthcare. Because they're not a priority. So since when did the NHS become the Nazi health service instead of the National Health Service? Because that's Nazi. That is exactly Nazi policy. Oh, you're old, you're sick, you're disabled, you're not a useful member of society, therefore we don't need to give you healthcare, life-saving treatment you will not receive. Since when did doctors and nurses of Britain, the NHS staff, become vehicles for that kind of message, to be telling people asking for help that no, sorry, if your elderly relative or your sick relative or disabled relative has become ill, for whatever reason, they're not going to receive life-saving treatment. That's Nazi. There's no two ways about it. Crisis? What crisis? We've had trillions to bail out the bankers. We've got no trillions to save people's lives, children's grandparents, people's parents that actually we rely on for moral support, often for financial support, and often for physical support in terms of caring for children. No, we can do without the elderly. Will his dad be denied treatment because he's over 60? Will her parents be denied treatment because they're elderly or disabled? Will what applies to us apply equally to them? And now they've given themselves rights to do this, to literally kill people. That's the amount of power that they have. Do you think they're not going to use it? That this isn't going to be abused? So I ask people, you share this petition and you sign it and you share it everywhere, and we want millions signing it, because this is a big, huge no-no. Sorry. And how dare they push it through when actually there's no parliament. So we're talking, as I've said before, this is a coup. It's an ongoing coup. A coup of tyranny. And it's going to get very, very, very bad. It is going to get very, very bad. Brexit, COVID-19 and the debt deluge, the perfect storm about to engulf us all. The city ramped up in crisis after crisis, housing, health, educational, personal debt, rising mortality, in-work poverty, child poverty, homelessness. All of these crises were the choice of the political and corporate elite, and some have made fortunes from it. When austerity was really biting, tens of thousands of people were dying, public anger started to increase. So alarming was all this to the elite, they even started preparing for riots. But then they came up with another great con. And just like the great financial frauds of the decades before, that neoliberalism brought with it, like mortgage fraud, tax fraud, mass money laundering schemes, insurance policy mis-selling and the like, they decided to push up one of their own and made him masquerade as one of us in the greatest fraud of all. We now have Brexit and the people's government. Inverted commas. Britain's most valued and respected institutions have been seriously undermined in this great fraud. The result is that the country is less able to cope in times of need. The NHS obviously springs to mind, and so do the emergency services in general. But our own communities have been torn apart, NGOs and charities defunded, and the entire nation has been race-baited by our own government, who encourage the division of society as a whole and as a means to their own ends. Much of the coming blow to our society will be a direct result of not looking after one another as the generations before us have. The fallout of coronavirus only adds to Britain's problems as the country tries to extract itself from 40 years of EU membership. Those negotiations have now stalled, even though the terminus date of 31st December stands as confirmed by Boris Johnson recently. Journalists are no longer reporting about the biggest economic decision this country has faced since the last war. That Boris Johnson and his team have failed miserably to provide a workable, life-saving COVID-19 plan only demonstrates that these people should not be in command of complex social, political and economic conundrums, let alone Brexit, which mixes all three into the same cauldron. And that is who now has the powers to remove us from our homes. Oh, and the final cherry on the cake for the human beings of Britain who stood by Jeremy Corbyn and who, according to the evidence, we lawfully suspect were robbed of an election by rigging. Now, Keir Starmer, George Osborne's choice of leader for the Labour Party. George Osborne's choice. The people who queued up to vote in 2019, the people who joined the Labour Party in their millions because of Jeremy Corbyn, finally a human being, speaking for us. He's gone. But we'll all get out on the street and clap. Clap, 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 clap. What for? What are we clapping for? Why? Why are we giving a round of applause to a workforce that apparently this country has totally trashed, has totally said, yes, do you worst to them, Tories. We love you. We're going to vote for you. Not just once, not just twice, not just 3 times, but 4 times. And you start out with a tenuous coalition and you go from strength to strength to strength till, wow, Boris Johnson comes along, the man who has to hide in a fridge from reporters. We'll vote him in by a landslide and give him the powers to do this. It is outrageous. How dare they give themselves powers to do this on the strength of a virus that puts people's health at risk, that they're using this to deny healthcare to people who are sick and disabled and elderly. They're using it now to give themselves powers, literally, to take our children from our homes and kill them. That's the power they have. There's no bones about it. They have power to remove children and isolate them from their parents. And if that child dies, nobody's accountable. In fact, no, they can cremate the child and not even have any paperwork to show for it, except one medical officer. This is outrageous. Family court rules now applying what? To the whole of Britain? We cannot allow people who've murdered British citizens with an unnecessary economic policy and driven them into abject poverty and despair, knowingly driven nurses and doctors to suicide, hundreds of them. Now, am I a crazy conspiracy theorist? Am I really? No, I am speaking from the evidence. These are facts that I'm sharing here. Now, you share this. You sign this petition. If you are a human being, I don't care if you're Tory, if you voted Brexit, if you're a Lib Dem, I do not care. But surely you care about your rights. And if you don't, you've got no business calling yourself a British citizen, because my ancestors, my forebears, gave their lives for those rights. And they struggled through 2 world wars, austerity like nobody has known since World War II. But it is going to hit again. And in a country that is being governed by these lying, vicious criminal monsters who have given themselves powers literally to drag us from our homes and kill us and dispose of our bodies without so much as a buy or leave, accountable to nobody. How dare we clap on demand from a BBC that promotes this kind of horror? This is horror. I've had people phoning me up, friends who just, are nowhere near what you would call a political extremist or activist, terrified of the powers that they are now giving themselves. Worse than the threat of coronavirus is the terror bill that they have just introduced. And I urge people to go through it. And I urge serious questions to be asked. And the BBC, I tell you now, when this is over, you are gone as an institution. Shame on the lot of you. Because a free media in a democratic society is meant to hold their feet to the fire. And hold them to account. And you're not. Instead, let's all celebrate the cattle shed. I'm sorry, I know that I am emotional, but this is just too serious for words. I've spent my life surviving child abuse, dealing directly with child abuse, confronting the authorities, getting absolutely nowhere except brick wall, brick wall, brick wall, brick wall. I'm surrounded by brick walls. Okay? Now, this is a pedo's paradise. It really is. And it has all been going on anyway, behind the scenes. Carol Woods, for example, has repeatedly been sectioned. They're regularly sectioning people. But at least she had a modicum of rights. At least she had a right to representation, to make contact with people. That's gone. That has gone. This is absolutely the worst. This is an existential threat. It just cannot be. It cannot be. Brexit needs to be suspended. Like I say, you get a deal with the EU. We are going to continue to have a trade deal at the very least with the EU, Boris Johnson. Okay? Because no government in its right mind refuses the market on its doorstep. Right? That is just insane. Nobody voted for it. We were told there would be a deal. So, liars again. You know, oh, it's what people voted for. No, they did not. They did not. The NHS has not received an extra 350 million a week. They've been losing 350 million a week. And how much are they paying a week now to private hospitals that you, Boris Johnson, your party leadership members, your ministers, all have shares in? Only one medical officer is required to sign off compulsory treatment order. So what does this mean? Are we all going to be forced to have vaccinations now? Why should we trust? Why should we trust that the vaccinations are actually going to be safe? If any come about. If that's what this is going to amount to. That people are forced to have a vaccination. That, what proof do we have that it's safe? You know, they've agreed to roll out 5G. We still have no assurances that 5G is safe. In fact, the scientists are saying it isn't. So, you know, this isn't conspiracy theory madness. This is fact supported by scientists and studies that 5G isn't safe. But it's being rolled out everywhere. Compromises people's immunity, apparently. Does it? Have there been an investigation? Have we had a parliamentary debate about 5G being rolled out, a new technology, unknown, actually by scientists, alleged to be dangerous, but no parliamentary debate on it? No public debate or consent for this. Well, I tell you now, people, your silence is consent. Your silence is consent. Understand this. Sign the petition. Sign it. Share it. Talk about it. This is dangerous. It is deadly. And the powers that they're giving themselves here can be abused. Why do they need such powers? Why do they need such powers? We're not dealing with smallpox here, are we? We're not dealing with the bubonic plague. The majority of people that contact COVID-19 have no symptoms or very mild symptoms. He's had it. He's back in Parliament. Tory ministers, they're all back up on the feet a week later. Public engagements. Well, why are we being locked in our homes for 3 weeks and told not to go out? And, you know, even more disturbing, 2 nurses, very sadly, have died of the virus. Coronavirus. Now, I've written to the NHS and I said, can you clarify, please? Are the people who were being told as judged dead through the coronavirus, have they been tested specifically for COVID-19? Because coronavirus refers to all forms of cold and flu, all strains, whereas COVID-19 is a specific new strain of flu. So can you clarify how many are actually dying from COVID-19? How many people infected actually have COVID-19, or are they infected with coronavirus in general? What are you actually testing for? And if you are testing thousands of people for COVID-19, then why aren't the doctors and nurses being tested, the staff at NHS, why aren't they being tested? Because they could be a source of infection for people turning up at hospital for other illnesses that have got nothing to do with the virus. So because these nurses have very sadly died, I mean a doctor's died, it is very disturbing and very sad, and especially when you look at the levels of protection that these nurses, they haven't had any protection. Because the NHS has been so badly run down that they've had to build them a cattle shed. But, you know, we're being told that it isn't a request. Stay at home this weekend is not a request. Please stay at home for them, she urged people. We cannot relax our discipline now. If we do, people will die. Is this discipline? Is this discipline? They said they were going to scrap our human rights. Well, it looks like they've just done it. And this for 2 years? Over a virus? Talk about exploitation. Talk about exploitation. This is outrageous. Now, in France, you know, the professional people came out. What is going to happen in Britain? I dread to think now. And it is no wonder that people are feeling terrified. It is no wonder people are feeling terrified. This is terrifying. This is more terrifying than actually the virus itself. So, you know, get back out on the street on Thursday. Clap, 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 clap. Like happy clapper idiots. As the nurse has explained here, spoke to my beautiful friend last night, a lung doctor in the NHS. She said, while it's a lovely gesture, instead of just clapping, please could you just never ever vote Conservative again? Well, we're not going to have that chance. Because I don't think there's ever going to be a fair general election in this country again. I don't think there's ever going to be a Jeremy Corbyn leading the opposition ever again. Unless we the people stand up for our rights. And we do it lawfully. We do it with compassion. We do it with consideration and care. We do not address anything that they're doing through riots. Because that's what they want. We do it lawfully. And we do bring a class action against them for damages. They have damaged our country. And they do need to face the law. They need to stand trial for the damages that they have inflicted on our society and the amount of people. And now, even introducing Nazi policies. I tell you, they would never have even dared mention any of this while my grandparents were alive. There would have been uproar. But there is no uproar because we're all locked in our homes. And I'm in such a situation now, I don't know what to believe. I don't know really what to believe. I just can only stick to the facts that I've shared repeatedly. So like I say, I'll leave my previous video link under this. Check that if you want to listen to that. But please do check the links that are under that video. And get informed. You know, we now have time, which is what they do not have. We have time. Time to think. Time to learn. Time to get with the facts and away from the theories. So, you know, don't lose hope, people. Stay strong. Because, as I explained to you, Boris Johnson, to the Tories, to the criminal cabal taking control of our planet right now, with their schemes, their dead men's antiquated fantasy dreams that they hope to fulfill with our technology, 21st century technology. The darker this world becomes under your governance, so all the brighter shall your light shine. And universal intelligence is coming home, and it's not going to go away. And you people in this life or in the afterlife, it's your choice. You either face reality now and be held to account for your crimes. You will be doing it when your physical body perishes. Okay? Now, if you believe that that makes me mad to know that, to believe that myself, then, you know, you better go and ask your Archbishop of Canterbury, what on earth is he doing? What is he doing? Why is he there? Why are the churches there? Why was the Queen crowned by the church? Why is she sitting head of the church? What is the church all about, if not about God and God's law? And upholding our rights. And this is against all our rights. And no government should be using a crisis to turn a crisis into an Orwellian nightmare. So, you know, what can I say? Big love to everybody. Sign the petition. Stay calm. As I say, we don't want rioting. We have to think about the children, the vulnerable. We're not going to go smashing our communities up. We are not cattle. We will get organised and we will fight back with the law. And the law is on our side.